Hello! I hope that you've enjoyed reading the story Righteousness Ji Zha gives up his sword. Today, we're going to be breaking down the important aspects of the text and looking at how we can create a summary of it in English to make it easier to understand and explain. Then, I'm going to have a conversation with my good friend Chris about the text. Chris, could you give a little introduction about yourself, please?
Sure. My name is Chris and I've been in China over 10 years, working in the education field, helping students to go and study abroad and prepare them. Yeah.
Oh, excellent. Thank you. So, to begin with, we should introduce our main character. We need to think about who he was, when he lived, and some of the background to his character, such as his relationship with his father. So, if we were to simplify that, we could say Ji Zha was the fourth son of the king of the kingdom of Wu in the spring and autumn period. Next, we need to talk about his first journey. The text states that once on a mission to the state of Lu, Ji Zha passed through the state of Chu. We could simplify this by simply saying when passing through the state of Shu. The next important point to include is his meeting with the ruler of Shu. In the text, it states that the ruler of Shu received him as a friend and cast covetous eyes on the precious sword he was wearing. As we are just writing a summary, we only really need to include the most important points from this, and those are that the ruler received Ji Zha and that he coveted or admired his sword. Next, we come to the most important part of the story. Here, we need to include three details. The first is that Ji Zha decided to give the sword to the ruler of Shu. Secondly, we need to mention that the ruler had died. And finally, we need to mention that Ji Zha still left the sword at his friend's tomb. So to put that all together, we could say Ji Zha decided that next time he passed through the state of Chu, he would present this to him as a gift. To his dismay, when he arrived, he found that his friend had already passed away, but Ji Zha left the sword at his tomb anyway. Finally, we need to include the moral of the story. First, we should say that he was a righteous person. Then, the text states that he would not waver in his determination to carry out his promise even though his friend had died. We could simplify that to say he would keep his promises in spite of any circumstance. Ji Zha was the fourth son of the king of the kingdom of Wu in the spring and autumn period. When passing through the state of Shu, he was received by the king and noticed that he seemed to greatly admire his sword. Ji Zha decided that next time he passed through the state of Shu, he would present this to him as a gift. To his dismay, when he arrived, he found that his friend had already passed away, but Ji Zha left the sword at his tomb anyway. From this, we can learn that Ji Zha was a righteous person who would keep his promises in spite of any circumstances. So Chris, what were your first impressions of this story?
It made me think very favourably of Ji Zha. His sword was clearly very special and very valuable, as the author states that the leader of Xu looked at it with covetous eyes. So it really shows that Ji Zha truly was a man of a word if he was prepared to give this up even after his friend had died.
Yes. Do you think this story still has relevance in modern society?
Oh, definitely. I think it's just as important today as it ever was. The importance of keeping our word cannot be underestimated. To build the society that we want to live in, honesty and righteousness should be its cornerstones.
Is there anything you'd like to ask about the text?
The text mentions that Ji Zha was born in the spring and autumn period. I've heard of this period before, but I never really understood the meaning of the name, so could you explain it to us, please?
Sure. It's actually named after a book, 春秋, which means spring and autumn, and it's a title of one of the classics of Confucianism. It is a chronological history of the kingdom of Lu, where Confucius lived, up until shortly before his death.
I still don't quite understand where spring and autumn come into this.
Well, the passage of the seasons represents the passage of time.
That is a very good metaphor for history. So because Confucius was such a prominent figure at the time, and because the book details much of the time period, that's why the spring and autumn period gets its name.
Yes, that's right, yes.
So why is this referred to as a period rather than a dynasty?
Okay, because at this time there were many different states or kingdoms. In the text they mention the kingdoms of Ru, Lu and Chu. It's only when those states are united under one emperor that we refer to it as a dynasty.
So like the Tang dynasty or the Song dynasty.
Yes, that's right, yeah.
The text also mentions that the poet Du Fu wrote about this incident, so could you explain a little more about that?
Yes, Du Fu wrote a poem mourning the passing of his friend. In it, he included the lines, "When I played chess with you, you were Xi An. Now in front of your tomb, I am Ji Zha, saying goodbye to the leader of Shu."
Who was Xie An?
Xie An was a statesman and scholar from the Eastern Jin dynasty. He was known as a courageous and cultured man. By comparing his friend to Xie An, Du Fu was showing how much respect he had for him in his life. Then, by comparing himself to Ji Zha, he was demonstrating how much respect he still felt towards him after death.
Those comparisons really do have profound meaning.
Yes. Can you think of any examples from Western culture that are related to this topic?
There is a very poignant tale from English literature that I think has some parallels with this topic.
Oh, really? What story is that?
The play King Lear by William Shakespeare. It is about the children of a king. King Lear had 3 children, all daughters. His youngest daughter, Cordelia, is the character in the play that really displays the idea of righteousness. As the king is growing older, he decides to divide up his kingdom among his 3 daughters, so he asks them to show how much they love him, and the elder daughters, who really do not love their father, flatter and lie to him to get their way. However, Cordelia refuses to do this, so the king is offended and banishes her.
So the king failed to recognize the righteousness of his daughter Cordelia. What happened next?
Lear's kingdom is faced with disaster after disaster because of the greed of his elder daughters, and it is only Cordelia who stays loyal to him. In the end, she is reunited with her father and dies in his arms. It is only through her death that the king realizes the loyalty and righteousness of his daughter.
Wow, that really is a moving story. Does it have any basis in history?
Well, that is debatable. King Lear was based on a real king in history, but like with many of Shakespeare's works, he took a lot of liberties with the truth. In English, we refer to this as artistic license.
I suppose in history there must be quite a few of these stories that are part truth and part myth.
Oh yes, probably the most famous one is the legend of King Arthur. His story also involved a sword, the legendary Excalibur. This was a sword that only the true and righteous King of England could possess. And according to the story, a magical lady rose out of the lake to present it to him.
Wow, that definitely does sound like a myth.
Yes, modern historians think that King Arthur might actually have been made up from stories of several different ancient kings, but some of it is definitely more fiction than fact.
Well, thank you for that. It's been very nice talking to you, Chris. I think we've really been able to explore the topic of righteousness. It's a moral standard that we should all aspire to, and it's been great looking at examples of it from both Chinese and Western culture. That's a bye from me today, and
Goodbye from me.
bye bye.